Welcome back to the Word Podcast, Sports News and Stuff. I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Richard Bruce Eisenhower Abernathy. I am James Buendia. It's good to be back. We are in the middle of a global pandemic.
Wait, what?
Did you not know? I
It's
actually
the first time hearing about it.
I just saw it on my Google News feed, which is an app that I haven't used in years, but I opened it up and it was like, oh, here's all the things you've missed. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Sports leagues are trying to return. On top of all that, we're in the middle of protests around the world for racial inequality when dealing with people of color in the police. It's sort of a weird time to be alive, if I'm just being honest with you.
I think that's the understatement of 2020 so far.
It is. I was complaining to you in the green room. I mean, I'm really. I have a job. I have a roof over my head. My family is safe, and I am. Even with those things, I'm starting to get a little. This is starting to wear on me a little bit. I don't know. It's weird. I don't know how to feel. It's like you feel bad about feeling bad. And I know that we try not to do this as a therapy session, but holy cow, what's going on?
It's a lot to process, man. There's a lot of facets to all of this, and there's physical health concerns and mental health concerns, and just being thrown off your general rhythm and the way you're used to life going on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So I would say with pretty high confidence that you are not alone. Okay. How you're feeling right now.
This is good to hear. I guess I should note, well, first of all, we do want to make sure that everybody is aware of the different avenues that you can watch the show on. Obviously, we're on all of your pod catcher apps. So we're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on Spreaker. You can also join us on YouTube. So feel free to give us a subscribe and rate and review us there. And while we're talking about digital outlets and mental health, there is actually a couple of notes that I do have on that. So first of all, there are avenues available for people where you can't go and see somebody because of the pandemic. One that I personally have had access to is Talkspace for online mental health access, and then there's also things like BetterHelp, which are also available on your favorite app store. So if those are issues that you feel like you may need assistance with, there are avenues out there, which is good. And interestingly enough, Talkspace is also available. You can integrate it with your Alexa device and talk to your therapist that way. So it's kind of interesting.
On that note, I do think that it's good that some of the stigmas and the way we talk about mental health and things like that seem to have improved a lot over the last couple of years. And I know they did a version of the ESPYs last week or earlier this week. I think it was earlier this week, actually. Mm-hmm. And I believe Kevin Love got an award for the work that he's done to speak out about the importance of mental health and addressing those things. And for so long, especially in that type of atmosphere where you're supposed to be the tough guy and the alpha male and all that type of thing, that talking about those things and addressing those concerns was just not something that seemed to happen very much. And to see a lot of athletes really come out as advocates and encourage people to talk to people if you're not feeling right or you're having issues, to do that. And I mean, I'm not comparing us to Kevin Love by any stretch of the imagination, but It is good that that's a thing that we can get into on the show a little bit and talk about and address and just do a small part to let everybody know it's okay to talk to somebody about those types of things.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, you really look at what and we've talked about this in the show a lot, what we're asking athletes to do in normal circumstances. It's a lot. And the psychological aspects of that are very rarely addressed. And I remember going to a coaching summit, for lack of a better word, in Belgium. It was 2 years ago, actually, and we had sports psychology curriculum for the week that we were there, but we also had the sports psychologist that was running that curriculum was also attached to us, so that when people needed help, they had someone on staff that was there to help people. And that was like it wasn't like a token thing, like, without giving too much details away, because, want to respect privacy, there were multiple people that needed to work with the sports psychologist that were coaches, just to get through that week. It was a really grueling week. So it was interesting to see, you know, we not just the athletes, but also coaches having to, use those facilities. So it's really cool that that Kevin Love is attached himself to that. I know Michael Phelps is also a spokesperson for Talkspace, and he's done a couple of like national ad campaigns regarding that. So yeah, it's I think that I agree with you. It's nice that we can actually talk about those things in a destigmatized way. It's okay to to seek out help when you get it.
Yeah, and to your point about what we're asking athletes to do now, on the one hand, it's great to see. I really appreciate them using their platform, using their voice, and using their reach to try to help people. But on the other hand, it's a little sad that that has to fall on them, and that our elected leaders and officials and people who have traditionally filled some of that space and handled some of those things, whether it's out of inability or, in the case of a few prominent individuals, just a total lack of interest in doing anything like that. And it's sort of fallen on them, and they've taken it and run with it, fortunately. But I guess that's as good a segue as any into a new segment that
Yes,
we're going to start this week. It's called 15 Minutes of Shame.
I love it.
Trademark pending. Um, we discussed this in the green room, but I feel like this is a conversation we can share with our loyal listeners of, listening to the show over the last couple of weeks. While it's good to talk about these things, and not just for our own, mental health and venting the frustrations, and
Mhm.
just having pertinent conversations that are sort of on everybody's mind right now, it struck me that it's maybe not always the most entertaining or enjoyable listen, and especially with that just being, topics that are sort of in everybody's head all day, every day, given what's going on.
Yeah,
On the one hand, we don't want to just act like those things aren't happening and ignore them and be like, hey, let's just do some fun, silly stuff. I mean, we want to try to find that balance. So we're going to try to harness that a little bit more this week and really focus uh, our vet session to about 15 minutes and just get it out there and feel better, and then move on and talk about some things that aren't as life and death. So,
yeah.
James, with that, I will cede the floor to you, and you can kick
Wow.
this bad boy off.
Well, there's I really appreciate the segue. I mean, this is why you are the executive producer of the program.
Did you
I'm
hear that, Marcus?
yeah.
That's right. Respect the title, Marcus.
If you want to move up in the broadcasting world, Marcus, you've got to look at what Rich is doing. I'm speaking to him as if he's in the room. He's completely AWOL.
It's almost as if he doesn't exist.
That would be preposterous. Don't be ludicrous.
Okay.
No, I think you're exactly right. It is weird. Maybe the people that are going to help us get through some of the issues we're having right now are not who we traditionally would think of. And a great example of that is what's going on with the protests around the country and around the world. Is that they are causing people to reconsider, and even legislatures to say, okay, well, let's reconsider things. It's very strange to me. I'll kick off the 15 minutes of shame with the elephant in the room, which is the Trump rally last Saturday. It's very strange to me that you have so many things going on that are not being addressed at the national level when it comes to leadership. And we've all just accepted that. So I went on a news diet over the weekend. It's actually funny. I have a really good friend from Belgium, who I met when I was at that coaching summit I talked about, and her and I were talking. Believe it was Monday. It was either Sunday or Monday, and she was with her family, and they were asking. They were like, "Hey, so what's going on with the Trump thing? Did he see the rally?" And I was like, "I actually I did. I didn't watch it." So I went back and looked at the clips, and I was, you know, I don't even know what the right word to describe it is, because it's as if nothing has happened over the past, what you and I talked about in the studio or in the green room, 3.5 months. It's almost as if that's over with. I mean, he spent, this is a great clip on Seth Meyers. He spent like 8 minutes talking about like his rebuttal to his health concerns because he wasn't drinking water or whatever. And that's kind of funny in and of itself. It's like, why would you amplify it that much? Because like, so, yeah, I think Trevor Noah made a good point. He was like, dude, we made a joke about the water and stuff, and then now you're doubling down on it. So now we really are like, is everything okay with you? Like, why? So I'm watching the clips, and I'm like, are you going to talk about coronavirus or protests or anything? And I realized that that's not in the cards for him with the president. And I think that
He has no interest in being president.
well,
He just wants to campaign.
yeah,
He wants to
and
be president, not be president.
yeah,
If
and
that
it's
if
it
that
no,
makes any sense.
it does. I get it. No, and it's really sad because I have to be honest. Okay, so let's we've been very candid today on the show, which that's good. That's why I like doing the show. I had to take 2 days off 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't do the show with you. And one of the main reasons why I had to take 2 days off is I was very weirded out by what was going on in the world with the protests and coronavirus kind of creeping back up, and I sort of felt like the walls were crashing in around me, and I was like, I'm just not in the zone right now to do this. And my boss, uh, has always been encouraging us, hey, if you need time off, take time off. Just because you're working from home, it doesn't mean that you're on vacation. So I took some time off, and what's upsetting about it is I have that luxury, and that's great, and I did that. But what's upsetting to me is that the national psyche is not being really looked at all. And I think that's one of the things that's very rare about a president, that more so than anybody else. And so the thing I always look back to 9/11. And I remember, and I've mentioned it in the show before, I remember at 9/11 thinking, I'm very glad that the president is taking this seriously and addressing us as Americans, or people that live in America. And we don't have that right now. We have a guy that's like, oh yeah, I mean, come to my 6,200 person rally in, hey, what president gets 6,200 people? I mean, I guess it's because of the pandemic, and I know there was like trolling going on with people getting tickets that weren't expecting to go. But so that's my entry for the 15 minutes of shame. I just I don't know. It's hard to sum it up in a concise manner.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things.
Ooh,
First and foremost, the protests for racial equality in this country continue to go on. Obviously, the coverage of them is a little different than it was the first couple of weeks, which we've talked about on the show before. This just sort of general exhaustion after a couple of days, or with some topics, a couple of hours, a couple of weeks, whatever it is. We just have a limited amount of time that we can really focus on something, or frankly, give a shit about an important topic. And it feels like we're getting there quicker with this than I thought. Not to base it all off what's covered in the media or what's the news with that. I mean, there's obviously a lot more going on than that, but it does sort of seem like there's a little bit of a little bit of stall ball going on, to use a sports analogy, where people are just trying to kind of wait it out. And not that things were going to happen quickly when it comes to reforms and different laws being changed, or the structure and some of the systemic issues being overturned. Obviously, that's not going to happen overnight or in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months. That's a long-term deal. But the lack of more impressive and progressive immediate action has been a little concerning. That if there ever was a time for that ball to really get rolling, it's now, and it doesn't feel like that's happened as much as I had hoped. So hopefully the people that are out there peacefully stating their case and making their points and trying to push for different things will keep doing that, and hopefully people will listen. And if not, then we need to exercise our rights to get some people in there who will listen and will make some of these changes. So I hope that continues to go well, but I've been a little pessimistic about that over the last couple of days. And obviously coronavirus is still a huge, huge, huge concern. And it sounds like a broken record on this show and pretty much any podcast you listen to or any show you watch these days.
Yeah.
But the numbers keep going up drastically in some states, yours included, mine not too far behind.
Yeah.
I believe yesterday or Tuesday of this week was the second highest day we've had for cases, period, since it started. And people are just kind of shrugging their shoulders like, yeah, well, what are you going to do?
Did you hear I hate to interrupt, but did you hear the clip from the Trump rally where he said, I'm going to tell my people to slow the testing down? And I
Yeah.
was like, are you?
No,
This is what
not I'm going to. I did tell my people to slow the testing down, to which in the typical Trump news cycle is Trump says crazy, ridiculous thing that would get any other president impeached or immediately out of
Yeah.
consideration for election or reelection. His defenders go on and say, no, he was just kidding. And then he goes out of his way multiple times to reiterate that, no, I wasn't kidding. I did say that and I did mean it. And then people still proceed to not give a shit or do anything about it.
Yeah.
And that sort of goes into my next point of, with all the terrible things that are going on and all the crazy shit that's happening, the inability of anyone to step up and do anything about it or even try to do anything about it, with some of the stuff with AG Barr and Democrats just saying, well, we're not gonna try to impeach him. That's our work to do in the election. And it makes no sense to me. Even if you're not successful, you have to still try to hold people accountable when they do things that either A, you don't agree with, or in this case, B, seem to be pretty illegal things that they're doing.
Yeah.
And the response is to, well, we're just, let's not worry about that, which gives me very little hope in anybody. And we've been critical of Trump on this show many times, but I'm going to be critical of the Democratic Party as well. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not doing what they're elected to do. And they're not looking out for the country. And I just don't understand why, even if you feel like it's a hopeless thing, you still have to try. You still have to do it. You can't just give up and make it a fait accompli and just, what are you going to do? And it's just so disheartening for all the people that are trying so hard to make things work and to make things better and to fix some of the things that are going on, things that shouldn't be political issues like wearing a mask and things like that. But, here we are. It's just so dispiriting and kind of soul crushing to just watch the people that you think are going to have your back and fight for those things just to not even try. It's a hard thing. It's a hard pill to swallow, and it's a hard thing to watch.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. It would seem like strike while the iron is hot, and that hasn't happened. Everybody seems to be going along with the status quo as if we're debating minutia on some budget reconciliation bill, but it's the health and safety of a lot of people. It's the security of the economy that's really taken a hit, at least for everyday citizens,
which is tied to the health of the people.
Yeah, and so I'm a little bit weirded out by that as well. I don't understand the lack of action, and that's concerning for people that we say, oh, well, I support the Democratic Party. It's like, well, I mean, they don't really seem to be stepping up to the plate. Maybe they have no interest in that. I don't know. Pelosi, where are you at? I mean, what's going on?
I've been thinking about this a lot over the last couple of months and really the last couple of weeks, especially. And I'll try
Hmm.
to kind of end at least my part on this. If you have anything else, feel free to
Yeah.
jump in. But politics, there's always been political theater to some degree,
Hmm.
and a lot of it's for show. But it seems like so much of the discourse now is it's not, well, we think this is the best way to grow the economy, and we think this is the best way to grow the economy. And we're going to hash out those differences so people can disagree, but we're all trying to kind of do the same thing. That's an overly simplified version, but that's how I feel like things have generally been in our lifetime. But
Hmm.
things have deteriorated so much over the last 10, 20 years to where it's like people are saying different things. It's, well, I think that people shouldn't be needlessly harassed and killed and targeted by police and other people in this country just because of the color of their skin. And other people are fighting that as a concept. I mean, that's just one example, but it feels like politics has really become sports in a way,
Hmm.
where there's just this irrational, this is my team, this is who I grew up with, and everything that they do is great. And if you don't say what they did is great, then you hate my team and you suck, and I'm going to make threats at you online, and I'm going to call you names and all these sorts of things. And maybe I'm just an idealist, or maybe I just am not realistic about how things were, but it doesn't feel like that was always the case. And now there's just this sports fandom to it where your side can do no wrong and the other side can do no right, and there's no real discussion, and we've all retreated into our areas where the people we follow on Twitter or Instagram or whatever are people that we agree with, and we just get our viewpoints confirmed by people that justify and validate how we feel, and anybody who says differently is an idiot and a Nazi or a libtard or whatever the case may be. And it's just a series of name calling and retreating further into your corner and just digging in and not giving an inch on anything, instead of actually having a discussion or talking about these things or agreeing on topics and issues that really don't follow a party line. Like, people not getting sick and dying or having a job shouldn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Yes, the ways in which you approach such things may vary a little bit, but we should all be fighting for the same thing. And it just doesn't feel like that's the case anymore. And it feels like one side saying we need to fix this, and the other side says fix what? Everything's fine.
Hmm. It's fascinating. I completely agree, especially when it comes to what has been scientifically, or at least advised by medical professionals, when it comes to things like wearing a mask, where they're saying if everybody wears a mask, we can actually sort of stem things off a little bit. And what we're seeing is massive opposition to it. And what I find interesting about that is it's not coming from the sense of, well, we don't believe that that's true. It's because some people don't want to do it. And now people who do say, okay, we need to be wearing masks, they're being painted as like, these extremists. And I'm seeing it in Texas. I live in Dallas County in Texas, and we are being faced with, unfortunately, a really big rise in cases. And some of the establishments near my where I live have had to reclose because of outbreaks with the staff. And so Governor Greg Abbott is coming out, and he's sort of having to, unfortunately, ride this fine line of, well, we can see that there's more cases coming out, and we need to, he's advising people to stay at home, or if you go out, wear masks. But he obviously can't be too forceful about that, because his constituency as a Republican governor in, I didn't realize this, the largest Republican populated state in the U.S. He can't come out and be too forceful with that, because it's going to cost him, at the ballot and his allies.
Which is
And
ridiculous to me.
but it goes back to what you're saying, is that it's now become a political issue where where it really is just, you know, we've seen that masks can be effective if you're going to be out in public in the first place, which is debatable already. And he's conceded that point. He said, if you don't need to go out, don't go out. But it shows you the kind of clown world that we live in.
Yeah, and to that point, I saw an interesting tweet yesterday or the day before where someone said, if all of a sudden there was a drug out there that would make it 5 times more likely for you to not to get the virus, people would it would be like a Black Friday sale and people shoving each other down to try to get into CVS to get it. Yet we have a way to help drastically reduce your risk of getting it, which is wearing a mask, and people not only refuse to do it, are making displays of burning masks or going to city council meetings and doing some Parks and Rec town hall meeting cosplay with ridiculous statements and requests and rants and telling people they're listening to the devil by asking people to wear masks and things like that, where it's just, you can't even write this shit.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And to continue to see elected leaders of both parties, and not all, but a lot, refuse to really kind of step up and put their foot down and do something about it because they're so worried about not getting reelected. At what point, like, I would understand, okay, I don't want to lose my job if you're a person who's not especially financially secure.
Mm-hmm.
But can you think of a single governor or high ranking government official at the federal level of any kind that isn't a multimillionaire? Do these people need these jobs for money to make ends meet, to pay their mortgage, to buy their groceries, to pay for their kids' college? No. And so many of them are afraid to speak out because they won't get reelected because they want to be in a position of power. Now, I understand that some of that is they feel like they're there to make a difference and they can do things. But if you're not going to make a difference now and you're not going to stand up for something now and you're not going to try to save people's lives now, then why the hell are you doing this in the first place?
Yeah.
Why do you have that job if in a moment of crisis and a global pandemic and economic crisis and a day of reckoning for social inequality or racial inequality, if you're not going to use your platform and your office and your clout now to try to do something about all these things and to protect people from themselves, then get the hell out of there. And it makes me infuriated. And even as upset as I've been on the show before, or despondent or whatever it is, I feel like I've generally kept a level head about things for the most part. But I just have absolutely zero tolerance for that. And I don't care if you have a D or an R by your name. If you're not trying to do everything you can to get people to wear a mask and to promote, public health measures that are going to save people's lives, whether they like it or not, then screw you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a quote from Marco Rubio, and they asked him about his take on the mask thing, and he said, everybody should just wear a damned mask. And I was like, okay, Marco, like, I certainly am a little bit ambivalent about you as a politician, but
I'm not ambivalent. I'm surprised he even admitted to having read about masks being a thing. That's usually his move of, oh, well, I don't really know what you're talking about, so I can't comment on it.
He's getting fired up here, people. The Abernathy for Senate campaign in North Carolina just kicked off today.
I just had to get that off my chest.
Yes. No, I think that's great.
I feel a little better.
Yeah. But this is an absurd time. Why is everybody so calm? That again, going back to me, I had to take 2 days off. I was like, is anybody else seeing what's going on? Like,
I think everybody's just beaten down, man.
But
even look, I have group text threads and group me messages all about coronavirus, both at a national level, and I've got some with my North Carolina friends about some of the local members here.
Yeah.
And, March, April, even in the first part of May, people are like sending stuff every day and we're tracking it and we're on it. And now it's like every 2 days somebody sends something, or there's like a little message here, or there's another, well, these numbers look shitty, and nobody even wants to talk about it or think about it. And, again, some of that speaks to just our inability to focus on something too much for too long. And it's hard because you get burned out and you can only have so much outrage or fear or despair or whatever emotion it is that you're feeling. You can only have so much of it before you reach critical mass. But it does point to the fact that people, I think, are just exhausted, and things that
Mm,
we shouldn't have to be worrying about or focusing on or pushing people to do are becoming a daily thing.
hmm.
And it's just a lot in addition to everything else you already have to deal with in life. So I certainly understand it, but it is disheartening. And I really hope that either something changes or just by sheer luck, we manage to not get just completely wiped out by this. But it's concerning. And I understand that people say, well, testing's up, testing's up. Yeah. Okay, sure. But so are rates of infection. So are
Hmm.
other metrics that aren't as good. And it's not as simple as just, again, to the sports argument, you can't just cherry pick the stat that you like that makes your player look good. It's like, well, no, he doesn't suck. Look at his QBR. It's like, okay, that's not how this works.
Right.
And it doesn't work that way in sports. And it sure as hell doesn't work that way with a global health crisis.
So I'm now here's what I'm curious about, and I've asked a couple. We'll end on this, or this segment at least. I've asked. I only have one other person, two other people besides yourself that I talk to about this stuff with in this type of depth, and one of them is more. I get more logistical advice from him, and the other one is just more uh, like the psychological side. But I want to know what you think is going to happen here. We are in the end of June, and we have been dealing with this since the turn of the new year in a small way, and then it grew obviously. Where do you see things going? Because look, and I made the joke, or not the joke, but I did a whole bit last week about how I bought a standing desk and a new monitor because I knew I was going to be at home for a long time. And that became very clear to me, at least to the point where I wanted to do anything about it last week, or really 2 weeks ago when I made the orders. Where do you see things going? Because as I said, we're almost into July. The whole summer heat wave effect did not. In fact, we're seeing more cases than we've seen in some states than before. So,
Well, I think there's some complicated reasons for that, but I'll go ahead. I'll address
yeah,
that in a second.
yeah. So I guess to be frank, I mean, how screwed are we?
I don't mean to be completely pessimistic,
Yeah,
but I'm probably going to be. I think best case scenario, we don't see anything resembling air quotes here normalcy for at least a year. I think we're at least a year away. And that's a best case scenario because we're not even through the first wave yet.
right.
It's trending up and it's as high as it was at any point, and we're months in. And not only has it not gotten better, it's gotten worse.
Yeah,
Uh, the economy still sucks, and that's directly tied to public health. If people aren't healthy enough to work or want to go out and go places and feel like they can do that safely. Now, unfortunately, some people have tried to go places, and as we've seen, they can't do that safely. Then you can't have a healthy economy. That's just the way it works. They're linked, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to solve one to solve the other. And the first domino is the health part. You can't just try to fix the economy and then the health stuff falls in line behind it. That's just not the way it goes. So we're in a bad position there. Even if some of these vaccine trials that are starting up here soon go well, you're still a long ways off from mass production. And even when that does happen, it's still going to take years before anybody who needs or wants a vaccine can get one. I just don't see any way that we're not next summer getting back to anything that even approaches what life looked like in late 2019 or early 2020. I just don't see how it's possible. And going to what you mentioned before about the summer wave and things getting worse, I saw an interesting idea about that. And this is somewhat conjecture. So again, we're not scientists, but we did. Well, actually, we didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night either because you can't do that anymore. But one of the problems in some of these states, look at where it's really rising so quickly. You got Arizona, Texas, Florida, to a lesser extent, North Carolina. It is so hot outside that people are going inside and they're trying to do things in air conditioning and they're trying to go to malls and they want to go to movie theaters and they want to go to bars. They're not sitting outside at a safe distance in a park or hanging out with people and having a beer outside to have a social distanced hangout. Is they're going inside in rooms with recirculated air, and they're going to casinos in Las Vegas and they're not wearing
Mm-hmm.
masks. And that's why we've seen a lot of rise in those states where, yes, the higher temperatures help kill the virus, but not when you're inside where it's a nice crisp 72 and you're breathing the same air as all the other people around you. So till we make changes, and I've been critical of people in positions of power, but they also can't make decisions for everyone. They can advise and they can set things in place and they can try to save some people from themselves. And I feel like they need to do a better job of doing that than they've done to this point. It's also on all of us to take this shit seriously and to do what we're told to do. And that's a much easier thing to accomplish when everybody's on the same page and we're not having these stupid fights about whether wearing a mask is okay or not. And, people follow the tone of the leadership. It's that way in any organization, in any country. That's just the way human society works, is that you look at the people who are in charge. And if they say one thing and do another, then you say, well, screw it, I'm going to do what I want because that's what they're doing. So they have a role to play in this, but so do all of us. And even if it's little things, wearing a mask or maintaining distance or not going places unless you need to, we all have to do better. And we owe it not just to ourselves, but to our fellow humans to not be dicks about this whole thing. And frankly, we haven't done a very good job of that so far. So I would like to think that that's going to change and that things are going to progress a little faster. But I think best case scenario, we're a year out from things really being back to anything resembling normal.
Isn't it fascinating how to go on what you're saying about the personal responsibility? Not only are we maybe lagging behind in terms of the things that we can do to help, that have been proven, but I look at other countries and there's different scenarios. But I look at other countries and it seems like there was never a debate. But here, I agree with your assessment that like it's going to be a while because we can't even do the basic things. Again, texting with my friend from Belgium, you know, all their cases are going down. They took social distancing very seriously and isolation, and that's a different population statistic. But here we could, some people didn't even want to lock down. We had protests about that and people resisting against that. And so it looks like, you said a year. It's like, are we ever going to get over this thing? Like, is there ever going to be a point where we can say like, oh, we've got it under control? Whereas some other countries, New Zealand, obviously they went down to 0 cases and they had 2 new cases come in, and that was being covered, I think, on John Oliver's show. But like I agree with you. We're really in a bad situation here because we're not even through the first wave.
Well, we just have such a culture that for whatever reason is resistant to science and facts.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Fauci had a great quote about that last week that we talked about off the air. But I mean, this is a silly example, but it helps illustrate the point. Like the whole Kyrie Irving thing a couple of years ago about whether the earth was flat or not. And it was like, well, I think it merits a discussion and, we can all have our opinions and stuff like that. Like we've gotten to, and you see it with the way that some of the discourse is about different subjects where it's all about both sides. Some things are true or false, black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is a hot dog a sandwich? That's the thing that we can debate. But science has turned into well, I know that's what it says, but I just don't believe it.
Yeah.
And well, I know people say that's the truth, but that's not my truth. Is that we've gotten so out of control, and I'm as pro First Amendment as anybody, and this isn't really a First Amendment issue, but it's gotten to the point where we bend over backwards to cater to people and let them say their piece and let them have their opinion and talk about things that are blatantly false and untrue because we either A, don't want to appear to be discriminatory, but when it comes to just having conversations and talking about topics and debating things that aren't up for debate, it's really exploded in that regard where everybody gets an opinion and we can talk about what that means or what that doesn't mean and is this true or is this real, and it's just gotten out of control to the point where nobody wants to believe anything if they don't want to believe it or it's inconvenient or doesn't fit their worldview or isn't what they want to hear. And I'm not saying that everybody has ill intent with these types of things. Some people do. Other people are just confused or don't get it or it's scary. But we've created an atmosphere where people are allowed to question those things. And then when you have a real crisis like this where everybody has to be on the same page and agree, then we just can't do it. We can't just all agree on what the facts are and what needs to happen. Is that everything becomes, somebody pushing an agenda or somebody not wanting to admit an uncomfortable truth or whatever the case may be. We can't just all agree on anything. I know in a lot of instances that's healthy and that's good, and it forces us to consider other viewpoints and to talk about things. But there are certain aspects of life and society and history where it is black and white, and it is true or it is false, it is right or it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And health and science is one of those areas. And we're just not able to have that discussion that way. We're not able to all get on the same page because we're so used to arguing and fighting about everything that we can't put that aside, even if it's costing hundreds of thousands of lives.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself. Richard Bruce Aristotle Abernathy, wrapping up our 15 minutes of shame segment. Well, I
Well,
guess
40 minutes of
40
shame.
minutes of shame.
40 minute of hell. Nolan Richardson is sponsoring the segment this week.
But I couldn't agree more. I kind of think it's great that you kind of put it so succinctly. It is interesting. I mean, we have this show that you and I do. We talk, we brand it as sports news and stuff, but it's interesting because there's just not much. It feels weird to talk about other stuff. So I mean, it's okay that we kind of expanded on that segment, but
Yeah,
it's
it does feel weird, but I also don't want to be Debbie Downer for everybody every
right,
week.
right. There is some sports news. Let's start with the NBA playing at the Wide World of Sports in Orlando, Florida. Which,
Hypothetically. This is one of those things where until they actually tip off, I'm not going to fully believe that it's going to happen.
ooh,
If you ever booked a trip and you don't really fully believe that you're going to go there or do that or see that band or go to that game until you're actually walking into it or getting on the plane or whatever.
yes,
That's kind of how I feel with the NBA right now, where every indication is that it's going to happen, but until they throw that first jump ball up and games start, I'm not going to believe it. And even then, I'm just going to be waiting for the other shoe to drop the whole time. But
well, yeah, and we've talked about it on the show before. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for this to happen. Now,
well, in one aspect, it does.
what is that aspect?
Got to get that cheddar. Got to follow the money, baby.
Right, but they're doing this in a state that is seeing a lot of there. It's
Yes.
becoming the new hotspot.
Yeah. And the whole myth of the bubble has been just completely debunked.
I see. This is the issue that I have, and even my, I guess if you want to call it that, I don't even know if I call it that. My favorite sports league, the Premier League, starting back up in England again, with no fans and all that. Whatever, they're playing games, and they started playing last week. And again, to me, I'm like I don't care. It doesn't it doesn't. I don't want that. I don't want to watch a empty stadium. Who cares? I don't know. What has happened to me?
You're not alone. And it's not that I don't want to watch. I do, but I just feel a little guilty about it.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a chance that can help with some of the things that we've talked about earlier, the feeling burned out, the
Hmm.
feeling
Hmm.
overwhelmed. So I have concerns. I have reservations, both from a standpoint of the well-being of the players and the staff and all the people involved. But then you've also got people who need a release, and you've got a bunch of people whose jobs are dependent on those sports coming back. There really is a pros and cons to it, and it's a hard thing to balance and judge. And I think even the leagues have thrown their hands up a little bit to some degree about whether it's a good idea or not. But I I want to be excited, but it's been hard for me to get really revved up and ramped up for it, given everything else that's going on and the tenor of all the other events going on in this country and the world right now.
This is it's not that it's meaningless. It's just that to me, I just don't have any interest or excitement. And maybe that goes back to what you're saying. Maybe maybe I'm just so exhausted by life that I'm just like, it's another thing I gotta try to get excited for or be interested in. And I just can't do it. But I don't have it. I mean, looking at the notes that you prepared for the show, it's I was thinking like, oh wow, like, oh, these leagues are starting making moves and checking out news stories, but it's not something that I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to DVR that Yankees game if it if it happens to occur. The Red Sox game, I guess, is probably more appropriate for me. But like I just I don't have that. And I guess before we dive into some of the logistical things that are going on with sports, that's something that I think is one of the weird side effects of the pandemic is, for me personally, being without sports for that long. I'm like, maybe I don't even like this. Maybe it doesn't matter as much, which is a weird place to be in because it's always sort of in the background in my life, obviously, for this show. And so it could be a temporary thing. Maybe I need a little reprieve. And then when things get back to normal, that would be like, oh yeah, like I remember sports, they were fun. But I don't know. I really I'm struggling with that, particularly with soccer.
I have a prediction. We've all had the friend that just cold turkey stopped smoking, and they're like, dude, I'll never smoke it again. I don't miss it. And then you're out for a beer one night and you're walking out, and as he walks out of the bar, some guy's smoking, and he gets just that sniff of it. And then he's like, okay, I got to bum one. I got to have one, man. Can you give me a smoke? And I feel like that's going to be you on about August 2nd with the NBA back, that you're being, oh, all right. I'll have one. Let's do it.
If the league comes back and nothing terrible happens, like, how are we going to pull this off?
I heard an interesting discussion about this today. I was listening to Zach Lowe's podcast, and he had Kevin Pelton on. And any NBA fans out there that don't listen to the Low Post and Zach Lowe, you're missing out. He's incredibly smart. He's very nuanced. He has great discussions with a lot of different people, and is very thoughtful about not just the game from an X's and O's standpoint, but a lot of the big picture stuff too. And one of the things they were talking about, and it was a point that I hadn't heard anybody make yet, and I thought it was very interesting, was especially now that we're seeing and hearing about guys testing positive,
Mm-hmm.
like NBA players. Um, we've heard about some. I'm sure there are many more that haven't been publicized, but we're seeing it in a lot of different sports. Is that even though the concept of the bubble is sort of a myth, and we're going to have 22 teams at Walt Disney World, at least that's the plan, and it won't be a complete bubble because staff will be in and out, but there's going to be restrictions on players and where they go and what they do and different protocols and things like that to try to keep them in a safer spot. But they made the point of being in that environment. Well, obviously we can't say that nobody's going to get it. And almost certainly somebody's going to test positive while they're there playing games, that they're probably at a lower risk for contracting it in that scenario than they are the way things currently stand in the country.
Ah.
And that was not really a connection I'd made or something I thought about. Now, some of that relates to not only the rising rates across the country, but look at where a lot of these guys live. They live in Florida, they live in Texas, they live in California. Whether it's, warm weather spots and, big states and big cities, but, Florida and Texas are no tax income states. So a lot of guys live there. You've got multiple NBA teams in those cities. So there's a lot of guys that are there already anyway. And it does seem like a pretty good point and that's not to excuse or this is a reason we should do it because, well, actually it's better for you if you do this. That wasn't the case they were trying to make, but I'd not really thought about it through that lens and from that angle of they're actually less likely to get it there with these protocols in place and just training on their own or going and doing their thing. And obviously there are a lot of potential issues, especially like we talked about earlier with some of the mental health stuff going on of being separated from your family and on the road and living in a hotel for 2 months or 3 months or however long some of these guys are going to be there. And those are real concerns. But from a just, global pandemic coronavirus standpoint, that they might be in a better position to stay healthy and not get it by being there. Now, that said, on the other side of the coin, if one or two guys on the team get it, I don't see how half the roster isn't going to have it,
Mm-hmm.
or a bunch of the guys that they play. I mean, baseball has its own set of issues, but at least in baseball, for the most part, you're not that close to people, or at least not to many people. And if you are, it's a pretty short thing. Whereas basketball, they're just all up on each other all the time. So I have concerns about the health aspects of it, but I thought that was an interesting point that Zach and Kevin were talking about, and it was a really interesting, viewpoint that I just haven't heard anybody else bring up.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of if and as you mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the program, if you sports could actually be a model for how to reopen the country correctly by having these strict protocols in place. Now, at that point in history, we hadn't gotten to where we are now, where people are so vehemently against even wearing a mask. But you
We were
made
so
the
young and naive back then.
It's so funny how that works, right? Like you were, because I remember you made that point. You're like, well, actually, sports leagues is taking extreme precautions could be a way to show how we could reopen offices and businesses. Now it's like that's completely out the window now. Like no one even people won't even wear masks. People won't socially distance, and
That was like 6 weeks ago, and it feels like it was a decade.
isn't it funny? That's what I'm saying. I feel like I'm living in a history book right now. Like I don't even. Yes, learn about your World War II, World War One, the Civil War, Vietnam War, all the different things that happened in history, the Civil Rights Movement, Watergate, etc. But you, when you learn about coronavirus, you better be ready. It's a roller coaster. We and here's. Do you know what's even? And again, I mean, I know we're kind of jumping back and forth. You mentioned something because I was kind of trying to. I'm not very good at mental math. I said, hey, I started working from home on March 14th. And you're like, yeah, it's been 3.5 months. Do you know that this has been the longest 3.5 months of my entire life? Like, this does not feel like 3.5 months. I mean, seriously, think about it. 3.5 months, like that goes by like nothing. Typically you just kind of go through your day, you do whatever. Next thing you know, it's Christmas. And you're like, oh, here we go, another holiday season. I better book my flight. It feels like I've been sitting in the same exact chair in my apartment for 10 years. And we're not even at, well, at least for some places in the country, we're not even at like in Texas, we're preparing for a huge wave where they're clearing out hospital beds, they're clearing out ICUs, they're saying this is going to happen. And it's just insane to me. But again, yeah, like we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show, we looked at maybe sports could be a way to sort of guide us through for a measured reopening, but that's kind of out the window now.
Yeah, it's so cliche to talk about how long it's felt, but it's true. It's the one universal thing that everybody can agree on about coronavirus is that every day feels like a week. And I liken it to, when you're on a road trip
Yeah.
and you've got your one type of road trip where it's like, all right, we're going to be on this highway for the next 14 hours and we're just going. And it feels so long where it could be the same trip. And if you're like on this back road and then this back road, I'm on this highway for an hour and then I'm on this highway for an hour. It at least feels like you're doing something
Right.
and you're getting somewhere. And that's sort of how life used to be, where it was like, okay, we have like the same rhythms and we do these things and there's this and there's that. And we're going to the same place and there's the same, bullshit with that. But at least it feels like we're getting somewhere and we're making progress. Whereas now it's just like the same thing all the time. And we're on I-10 going from Jacksonville to LA and we're just making the drive across the country. And it's the same shit everywhere. We're on the same road. There's no change.
Oh my gosh. It's insane. I think it's actually really good that we do this show weekly now, because we'll look back on it in whenever we get over this stuff and just have an almanac of like what happened, because I still am trying to wrap my head around it. I mean,
Are you trying to
that's
say that we're going to get the show in the Smithsonian, like National Archive?
I want us to get Library of Congress approval. Let's get it popping.
Well, we're on, Google Podcast and Apple Podcasts and YouTube and everywhere else.
Chuck Schumer can subscribe. Chuck,
Might
subscribe.
as well get it
Chuck,
in there.
Chuck, just give us a subscription.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the NBA, and
Yes.
let's just pretend for the sake of argument for the next few minutes that you're going to watch sports when they come back. Well, listen,
Big assumption.
let's just make you're playing an exaggerated version of yourself on a TV show right now.
Okay. I don't even know what that would look like, but I'm game.
Yeah, an exaggerated version of you is a little scary. But for the uninitiated, here's sort of the big picture
Okay.
aspect of the NBA restart in Orlando is
Okay.
all the teams are going to be at Walt Disney World at the greater Wide World of Sports
Wide World of
complex
Sports Complex. Yeah.
or what have you. And so teams are going to be at different hotels. There's going to be 22 teams that show up to play 8 games to finish the regular season for seeding and for the standings. So in the Eastern Conference, you got Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston, Miami, Indiana, Philly, Brooklyn, Orlando, and Washington. So really most of those playoff spots are set. The Wizards are a few games back. They are 5.5 games back of Orlando in the 8th seed. And the way the seeding is going to work is any team that's within 4 games of that final spot, there will be a play-in for that spot. So let's say that Washington plays well and Orlando doesn't, and they're 3.5 games back when they're done with those 8 regular season games to finish the season. Then there will be a play-in where the 9 seed would have to beat the 8 seed twice to take their spot.
Okay.
But if Orlando's still up 5.5 or whatever, that's good. That's locked. They're in the playoffs, and then things proceed as normal from there. Now, the Western Conference is a little more interesting because there's a little more of a race for that 8th seed. So you got the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Jazz, the Thunder, the Rockets have all clinched spots. The Mavericks have all but they're just a few percentage points behind the 6. But you've got Memphis, who's currently in the 8 and has a 3.5 game lead. And then behind them, you've got Portland, New Orleans, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Phoenix. So there's going to be a little more of a race for that 8 seed in the West. And you could certainly see a scenario where Memphis is not 4 games up on anybody and there's a play-in. That certainly seems to be a lot more likely in the Western Conference. So once they finish those 8 games, the playoffs will start. Things will proceed normally from there, best of 7s all the way through. The regular season is tentatively scheduled to start on July 30th, but that could obviously change. And the big thing, as we talked about, is really the health protocols and
Yeah.
keeping guys healthy. And especially we've started to hear a little more this week about guys testing positive. A handful of guys have opted not to go and play for
Yeah.
health reasons, or I believe Trevor Ariza didn't go because of that was time he could spend with his son, and he's in a custody battle, and that was time that he could spend with his son, and that was more important than going to play 8 games and having a slim chance of making the playoffs. So, but you're definitely going to see guys sitting out. And I think as far as playoff contenders go to this point, the biggest name that's not playing is probably Avery Bradley with the Lakers,
I
who's
saw
not
that
a,
story today. Yeah.
who's not a huge name, but he's been pretty good for them this year and as a contributor, and has played some decent crunch time minutes for them. And it's, certainly going to, I think they'll feel the impact of not having him, but it's not like a LeBron or a Kawhi or somebody of that nature is sitting out, at least at this juncture. But it's just going to be interesting to watch what happens. And I feel like we've talked about this every time we've brought up the NBA coming back, and there's really not a clear answer for it. But what's going to happen when guys test positive, and not just one guy, but, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, it seems really unlikely, as close in proximity as these guys are, both within their own team and with opposing teams, that one guy is going to get it and there aren't going to be 3, 4, 5 more guys that also test positive. So say we're in the conference finals and 6 guys on the Lakers have coronavirus. They say, all right, guess it's a lot of Alex Caruso and Dwight Howard in the Western Conference Finals. Or are they going to pause it for a week? I mean, and they haven't, there's not really a definitive answer to that, in part because, and this was Zach Lowe's point on the podcast today, of they don't really want to have to commit to something now and have that in writing. Back, well, you said this, so this is what you have to do, just because it's, it's a little bit of a scary answer.
Well, but this is exactly why I'm so confused as to why this is being put logistically at this level. Is that there? Okay, so I'll quote Fauci: "We will have coronavirus in the fall." Okay, so we will have coronavirus in the NBA. We already have it, right? That's why we stopped the league. And so, what are you going to do? Why are we even having this discussion? And again, I'm not. Now, your breakdown of the logistics, it actually was getting me kind of excited. Like, oh, this is cool. Like, yeah, let's get back. Let's play games. All right, I'm into it. But that's if everything works out. And it's probably not going to. We don't know.
Well, to our discussion earlier, it's not like not being there and playing games is going to keep guys from getting it.
Right. So shouldn't we shouldn't we just eradicate the disease first and then go back to doing things?
To me, it's an individual decision.
Mm-hmm.
And if a guy doesn't want to go play for whatever reason, I have no problem with that. I would completely understand. And if guys say, you know what, I'm in a position to win a championship, or I need the paychecks, or I'm a free agent and I need to go play well, I understand that too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a hard thing to figure out whether it's the right thing to do or not, or whether, not even that, but whether it's a good idea or not. I don't think it's inherently the right or the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, it's a complicated decision, but I do think it's something that everybody has to make for themselves. And it's not the same thing, but if your office said, look, you can either continue to work from home, we have no problem with you doing that, or if you would rather be in the office and feel safe coming in and want to come in and work from your station as normal, you're welcome to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the NBA has been really good about not punishing guys and giving them an out. And the NBA had a deadline, which I believe was technically yesterday or today, but seemed a little bit of a soft deadline. It does seem like we might see a couple more guys drop out that we think are playing right now. They've really kind of left it up to everybody, and I think that's the way to do it. And So I'm not fundamentally or morally opposed to the games taking place, but I also understand if guys don't want to participate and don't want to be there.
Mm-hmm. I find it almost just as entertaining to see if this actually happens than if if we actually have games. But there's so much uncertainty around everything, not just with sports. I mentioned earlier in the show that some of the restaurants and bars that had reopened near me in Dallas, they're now shut down again. And it's like, what is the world going to look like? When are we going to be able to just get back to normal? So I'm rooting for the NBA, obviously, to come back and like I said, you kind of got me hyped up.
Okay, so that's a lot on basketball, and we're going a little long already.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple other things to get to. We got to talk about some baseball. I've still got a few more real world thoughts that have sort of creeped into my head as we've been talking about things tonight, and I might need to get back on the therapy couch with you for a little while. So I think we should run this as a two-parter, James.
I like that idea. Makes it a little bit easier to digest for people. We certainly have a lot more to talk about. So you can tune into part 2 of this episode on your favorite podcatcher app, and obviously on YouTube as well. The Word Podcast, sports, news, and stuff.
You can also check our Twitter account for an update. We'll let you know when the next part of the episode is posted. You can follow us on Twitter at The Word Podcast. And we'll be sending that out here in a couple of days, TBD. So hope everybody enjoyed part 1. For my esteemed co-host, James Israel Kawhi Mundia.
Oh, he is Richard Bruce Carter Abernathy.
Thanks for listening to The Word. We'll be back soon, guys. Take care.